The Babysitter Who Never Came Home. Inspired by the disappearance of Evelyn Hartley, La Crosse, Wisconsin, 1953. The shock. If you think the suburbs are safe, you've never heard what happened on Maple Avenue. Subscribe, and let's begin. It was October 24, 1953, the kind of autumn night that smelled like rain and burning leaves. The Rasmussens' house sat at the edge of La Crosse, Wisconsin, its porch light glowing like a beacon in the quiet dark. Inside, 15-year-old Evelyn Hartley straightened the living room cushions and checked the baby monitor, a small radio receiver humming faintly beside her textbooks. She was punctual, responsible, the type of girl neighbors trusted instantly. Her father was a biology professor at the local college, her mother, the kind of woman who ironed handkerchiefs. Evelyn had never missed a shift. Never. At 7 p.m., the Rasmussens waved goodbye and left for a football game. Evelyn locked the door behind them, turned on the radio, and settled in to study. Nothing about that night should have been different. But at 9:30, when her father called to check in, no one answered. By 10:30, concern turned into unease. By midnight, unease became panic. Mr. Hartley drove to the Rasmussens' home himself. The house was lit, every lamp glowing through the windows, but no shadow moved inside. He rang the bell. Knocked. Called Evelyn's name. Nothing. The front door was locked. So was the back. He circled to the basement window, and froze. The screen had been cut open. The latch broken clean off. Mr. Hartley crawled inside and flicked on the light. What he saw would haunt him for the rest of his life. A chair overturned. A shoe lying on its side. Near the door, a single blood smear, faint but unmistakable, streaked across the frame. Evelyn's schoolbooks were stacked neatly on the sofa. Her glasses lay crushed beside the coffee table, one lens missing. And upstairs, the toddler slept soundly, untouched. There was no sign of Evelyn. By dawn, La Crosse was awake. Police cars lined the street, their red lights spinning against the mist. Word spread faster than the cold, the Hartley girls gone missing. Reporters arrived before sunrise. Volunteers gathered in the hundreds, then thousands. Bloodhounds picked up her scent from the basement window and led officers across yards, down an embankment, into a field of wet grass and corn stubble. There, they found more traces, a few drops of blood, a torn hem from a skirt, and footprints leading toward the highway. But then, nothing. The trail vanished. Detective Edward Klinkhammer, the man leading the case, stared at the evidence table like it was mocking him. A shoe. A pair of glasses. A small flashlight found on the lawn. She didn't run away, he muttered. She fought. Within 24 hours, every road leaving La Crosse had checkpoints. Farmers opened their barns. Divers searched the Mississippi River. Airplanes flew grid patterns over the marshlands. Nothing. Evelyn Hartley had disappeared as if the earth had swallowed her whole. But there was something else, a detail only the detectives whispered about. At 3 a.m., a local resident named Robert T. came forward. He lived just 2 blocks from the Rasmussens. Around 9:45 that night, he said, he saw a car parked with its headlights off, engine running. Then, a man walked out of the shadows, carrying something, or someone, in his arms. The figure in the passenger seat slumped forward, motionless. When the headlights finally switched on, the car rolled away silently into the dark. Police pressed for details. Make, model, color. Robert hesitated. Could have been a '52 Ford. Dark. Maybe blue. I didn't get the plate. Over the next week, La Crosse turned into a city of search parties. Neighbors combed ditches and fields. College students waded through creeks. Every lead felt promising until it didn't. A truck driver claimed he'd seen a girl matching Evelyn's description at a rest stop near Rochester, false. A farmer found clothing near a quarry, belonged to someone else. Detectives began looking inward. Who had access to the Rasmussens' home? Who knew Evelyn's schedule? That's when suspicion turned toward a local handyman, a man who'd once done repairs at the house. He had a criminal record for assault and was last seen driving a blue Ford. But before police could question him, he was gone. His home abandoned, car missing. Days turned into weeks. Autumn wind stripped the trees bare. The Rasmussens couldn't bear to stay in the house anymore. And Evelyn's parents, they stopped sleeping. Her mother sat by the phone for hours, listening for a call that never came. Every night, reporters camped outside the station waiting for updates. Every morning, the chief had nothing new to say. Until November 2nd. A farmer 20 miles away called in a report, "I found something in the woods." Detectives drove out immediately. There, beneath a cluster of birch trees, they found a piece of fabric, checked pattern, consistent with the skirt Evelyn was wearing. Beside it, a length of rope. And embedded in the mud nearby, a single boot print, size 11. But what froze everyone in place wasn't what they found on the ground. It was what they found nailed to the tree. A small, weathered note, half-torn, written in smeared pencil, that read, "Don't look for her. You won't like where she is." Detective Klinkhammer stared at it for a long time, jaw tight, heart racing. The handwriting was shaky, almost frantic. They bagged it, photographed it, sent it to forensics. But when the results came back, the paper told a darker story. The handwriting matched someone already in the case files. Someone who'd been interviewed the very first night. Someone who lived less than 3 blocks from the Hartleys. The spiral. Detective Edward Klinkhammer stared at the handwriting report spread across his desk. The forensics note was clipped neatly on top. Match confirmed, sample consistent with Robert Thompson. Robert T., the same man who claimed to have seen the mysterious car that night. The helpful witness. Klinkhammer's gut sank. Why would he lie? He whispered to himself. He ordered 2 patrolmen to bring Robert in for questioning. But when they arrived at his house, the curtains were drawn, the mailbox overflowing. The back door hung slightly open. Inside, dishes crusted with food sat on the table, and the faint smell of gasoline lingered in the air. In the bedroom, on the dresser, they found a Bible, open to the Book of Job. A photograph of a teenage girl was tucked between the pages. It wasn't Evelyn. It was another girl, one who'd gone missing 5 years earlier in Iowa. Robert's car was discovered 2 days later, abandoned in a wooded lot near Trempilo. Inside the trunk were muddy boots, a shovel, and a blood-stained handkerchief. Tests later confirmed the blood was human, but too degraded to identify. The sheriff's department called it the first real lead. But the more they dug, the stranger it became. Robert had been a handyman, a drifter of sorts. He worked odd jobs across small towns, moving frequently, never staying anywhere long. Local police in Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin had unsolved disappearances matching the same pattern: teenage girls, all last seen alone at night. Still, nothing directly tied him to Evelyn. Until a neighbor, Mrs. Lindstrom, came forward. She lived across from the Rasmussens and swore she saw Robert's blue Ford parked near their house 3 nights before the disappearance. "I remember because it rained that night," she said, voice trembling. "The car was just sitting there, no lights on. I thought maybe he was fixing something for the Rasmussens." When detectives showed her the sketch of Robert, she nodded without hesitation. "That's him. I'm sure of it." But the next day, before police could re-interview her, Mrs. Lindstrom collapsed on her porch. Massive heart failure, the doctor said. She was 62. Her statement was never signed. And the official record, somehow, went missing from the evidence room that same week. Klinkhammer's department was cracking under the weight of rumors. Reporters whispered that the sheriff was suppressing leads. Families accused police of incompetence. Meanwhile, Robert T. was still nowhere to be found. Then one night, a break came from the unlikeliest place, a gas station attendant outside Rochester. He reported a strange encounter. A nervous man, traveling alone, stopped for fuel just before dawn. His clothes were muddy, his hands trembling. When asked where he was headed, he said, "South." Then he paid in cash, and left. The attendant remembered the license plate, Wisconsin 432-91B. It matched Robert's car. But the report came too late. By the time officers reached the highway, the trail was cold again. While the public hunted for answers, the Hartleys were trapped in their own private torment. Mrs. Hartley refused to take down Evelyn's posters. Every night, she left the porch light burning. Mr. Hartley buried himself in his lectures, though students said he often stopped mid-sentence, staring at the wall, lost in thought. One evening, he returned home to find a plain envelope on the doorstep. No stamp. No address. Inside was a photograph, black and white, grainy, printed from a cheap film camera. It showed a girl sitting in what looked like a cellar. Her face was turned slightly away, but her hair, her build, it could have been Evelyn. On the back of the photo, someone had written, "Still alive. For now." The police called it a cruel hoax. The photo had no negatives, no date, no verifiable link. But the Hartleys didn't care. For them, it was hope, fragile, impossible hope. Then the second envelope arrived. This time, it was postmarked Illinois. Inside, a small piece of blue fabric, stiff with dried mud. It matched the dress Evelyn wore that night. Detectives traced the postmark to a mailroom in Rockford, Illinois. Surveillance wasn't common in 1953, but the clerk on duty remembered something odd, a man with a limp, wearing gloves despite the heat, mailing several envelopes. He drove off in a dark-colored car, maybe navy blue. Klinkhammer slammed his fist on the desk. "He's taunting us," he said. But the sheriff had other ideas. "We can't chase ghosts across state lines, Ed. The case is draining resources." They officially reduced the task force. Unofficially, Klinkhammer refused to stop. Weeks later, on December 5, snow fell heavy across La Crosse. The town had started to move on, the posters fading, the rumors quieting. But inside a cluttered evidence room, Klinkhammer found something odd, an unlabeled tape recording, dated the night of the disappearance. It had been misfiled under maintenance logs. He threaded the reel onto the player and pressed play. Static crackled, followed by faint voices. A man's, rough, impatient. Then a girl's, trembling. "Man, you're gonna tell me where he keeps the money." Girl, "I don't know." "Please, I don't." "Man, don't lie to me, Evelyn." Then, a sudden crash, glass breaking, and silence. Klinkhammer froze. The room went cold. The tape clicked to an end. He played it again. And again. The voice, that gravelly tone, it wasn't Robert Thompson. He knew that voice. He'd heard it dozens of times before, in the police station. He dug through personnel files until he found it, Deputy Harold Hal Jensen, one of the first officers on the scene the night Evelyn vanished. A veteran cop. Trusted. Calm. Hal was the one who'd handled the early witness statements. He was also the one who misplaced Mrs. Lindstrom's signed report. And, as the handwriting expert confirmed, he had signed off on the lost evidence report the same day the note in the woods was found. Klinkhammer's pulse pounded. He stormed into Hal's office, tape in hand. But the desk was empty. The chair pushed back. And on the table sat a half-packed suitcase, next to a revolver and a folded piece of paper. Klinkhammer unfolded the note, his hands trembling. "I didn't mean for it to happen." She wasn't supposed to scream. Beneath it, a photograph of Evelyn. Not the same one from the envelope. This one was taken inside a police vehicle. Her eyes wide. Her mouth open mid-shout. And in the reflection of the window, a man's face, partly visible. Hal Jensen. Klinkhammer bolted from the room, shouting for backup, but by the time units reached Hal's house, he was gone. His patrol car missing. His radio silent. The sheriff issued a statewide alert. 2 days later, Hal's car was found overturned in a ditch along the Mississippi River. No driver. No body. Just tire marks, shattered glass, and on the passenger seat, a bloodied flashlight engraved with the initials EH. As the snowstorm closed in, Klinkhammer stood by the wreck, staring out across the frozen river. Somewhere in that endless white expanse, the truth was buried. But whether it belonged to Evelyn, or to Hal, no one could yet tell. The reckoning. Snow fell in thick, silent waves over La Crosse, the kind that muffles sound and slows time. Detective Edward Klinkhammer stood by the frozen riverbank, boots buried in slush, watching divers pull fragments of a shattered windshield from the current. Deputy Hal Jensen's patrol car lay submerged in 10 feet of icy water. Inside, police found his badge, his revolver, and a soggy notepad, pages blurred beyond reading. But no body. The river had claimed him. Or so it seemed. Because 3 days later, 50 miles south, a fisherman on the Mississippi reported something tangled in the reeds, a tarp, weighted with stones. Inside, they found bones. The remains were small, delicate. Female. Cloth fibers matched Evelyn Hartley's clothing. But something didn't fit. There were 2 different blood types present. One belonged to Evelyn. The other, male. Hal Jensen's. The discovery ignited the town like wildfire. Headlines screamed, "Deputy linked to babysitter case." Radio stations replayed the tape Klinkhammer found, the voice, the pleas, the crash. But Klinkhammer wasn't convinced the story was that simple. Hal was a violent man, yes, but impulsive, not calculating enough to stage a disappearance this perfectly. Someone else had helped him. Someone who knew how to make evidence vanish. So he went back to the tape. He listened again, this time focusing on the background, faint noises, distant but distinct, a ticking clock, a dog barking twice, and a train horn. He replayed it over and over until he pinpointed it. That particular horn came only from freight trains leaving the North Rail Yard, nearly 4 miles from Hal's home. That meant the recording hadn't been made inside Hal's house, it was made somewhere else. Somewhere Hal had access to, but didn't own. The old police storage facility sat just off the rail yard. A forgotten building with peeling paint, used years earlier to hold confiscated vehicles. When Klinkhammer entered, the cold air bit like a blade. His flashlight beam cut through dust and cobwebs. The floorboards groaned. In the corner, beneath a tarp, was an old wooden chair, its rope binding still knotted tight. He felt the air leave his lungs. He radioed for backup, then swept the room again. That's when he noticed it, a box of old files shoved under a workbench. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. All of missing girls from nearby states. Some dated years before Evelyn vanished. Each photo had a name on the back. Some crossed out. And one, Evelyn's, circled twice in red ink. But the file box didn't belong to Hal Jensen. Every label, every evidence tag, bore the initials RT. Robert Thompson. The witness. The man with the blue Ford. The man who disappeared weeks before Hal's supposed confession. It all clicked like gears in Klinkhammer's mind. Hal and Robert weren't strangers, they'd worked together. Jensen had once been assigned to a burglary arrest where Robert was a suspect. After Robert's release, records showed he'd been employed briefly by the county maintenance department, under Hal's supervision. That meant the witness wasn't random at all. He was part of it. Hal hadn't acted alone. In the days that followed, Klinkhammer pieced together the unthinkable. Hal and Robert had run a small, predatory operation across state lines, using Hal's badge to gain trust, and Robert's handyman jobs to scout victims. Evelyn wasn't their first target, but she was the one who fought back. When things spiraled, Hal tried to cover it up. He planted the evidence, falsified reports, and when suspicion grew, he turned on his partner. That's when Robert disappeared, not because he ran, but because Hal silenced him. And when Hal realized Klinkhammer was closing in, he'd staged his own death in the river, but failed. His blood was found in the tarp because Robert fought back before dying himself. It was a perfect loop of betrayal. Two monsters devouring each other to stay free. Still, something gnawed at Klinkhammer. Evelyn's body was never conclusively identified. The bones were partial, the DNA degraded. What if? He went to the one place the search teams had avoided back in October, the old storm tunnels beneath La Crosse High School, once used for maintenance access. The Rasmussens' home was barely half a mile from there. He entered at dawn, crawling through damp concrete corridors, flashlight trembling. The tunnels twisted for miles, branching beneath the town like arteries. Halfway in, he found a small opening, a service alcove sealed with rusted bolts. Inside was an old trunk, covered in dust. He pried it open. Inside, a stack of notebooks. Each labeled in careful handwriting. E.H. Journal 1953. The first pages were normal, school notes, errands, reminders. But as he flipped through, the handwriting changed, shakier, more frantic. He keeps driving me around. Says no one's looking anymore. There's another girl. She won't stop crying. He says Hal knows everything. Then, the final line. If someone finds this, tell my father I wasn't afraid at the end. Klinkhammer's vision blurred. He turned the page, and saw a single Polaroid photo tucked between the pages. A picture of a basement, dim, brick walls, a broken clock on the shelf. The same ticking clock heard on the tape. He called for backup, but when officers returned later that morning, the notebooks were gone. Only the trunk remained, empty. Someone else had been there. 2 months later, spring thaw came early. A cleanup crew dredging the river uncovered a second tarp, buried under silt and roots. Inside was a skeleton, male, roughly matching Hal Jensen's build. A bullet hole through the skull. Robert's pistol lay beside it. The case was officially closed. The sheriff's office declared Evelyn Hartley presumed deceased. The files were sealed, the story buried. But Detective Klinkhammer never believed it was over. 10 years later, in 1963, a new family moved into a farmhouse just outside La Crosse. While renovating the basement, they discovered something wedged behind a wall, a small tin box wrapped in plastic. Inside was a photograph of Evelyn, older, thinner, eyes hollow, standing near what looked like a southern gas station. Stamped on the back, Tupelo, Mississippi. 1956. The FBI later examined it. The image was real. The date authentic. But Evelyn Hartley would have been 3 years dead. The story faded into legend, a campfire mystery that haunted Wisconsin for generations. Some say Evelyn escaped. Others believe the photo was another cruel trick by whoever else was involved. Detective Klinkhammer retired without closure. But he kept one artifact on his desk until the day he died, that cracked lens from her glasses, found on the Rasmussens' carpet. He used to tell visitors, "It's not evidence. It's a promise." Because somewhere between the blood and the lies, he knew one thing for certain. Someone out there still knew exactly what happened. And they never came forward. So if you ever drive through La Crosse on a foggy October night, and you see a porch light still burning on Maple Avenue, that's not a coincidence. They say it's Mrs. Hartley's way of keeping her daughter's path home lit. But locals whisper it's something else. That if you stand beneath that light and listen closely enough, you can still hear the faint hum of an old baby monitor. And sometimes, just sometimes, a girl's voice whispering from the dark. Don't look for me. If you think this story was intense, wait till you hear the next one. Subscribe so you don't miss it.